G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by Dasein is here and Mr. Algared. How are you boys doing?
Doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
We had a nice little joke before the show that I'm going to share. I was commenting about Algared. He's got a little sore in his head, and Dyson was saying the loan sharks have come around for his Star Citizen funding. I thought that was kind of funny, but yeah, and give him a knock on the head. But today, now we've got past that because Algared's very oppressed, you can tell. We're going to be talking about learning things from Cyberpunk that we can apply to Star Citizen backwards and forwards, and it probably might bring in a few other little games as well along the way. And this topic was actually brought to us by Dasein. He had a good little idea, and I picked up on it very quickly and said, that's a great idea. It probably seems very logical from the outset, but no one's really talked about it in the Star Citizen community. We've had all those complaints about Cyberpunk that we've obviously heard, but I've never seen anyone do a direct comparison about the pros and cons and learning the mistakes of Cyberpunk and applying those to Star Citizen. So I thought this was a really good topic to go over. Do you want to talk about what brought this up for you then, Dyson, and then we'll go from there, I guess.
Well, I've been playing a lot of Cyberpunk lately, and one of the things that came to mind was just like, this reminds me a lot about Star Citizen because it is a large, ambitious project that basically had been in development for a very long time. I think about 9 years. So you have this game that has been in development for such a long time, which has many big goals.
I think it was 7. 7, sorry. I think it was 7. Anyway, I digress.
Either way, a really long time, and basically you're looking at it and going, this could be Star Citizen. And that's basically the parallels that I initially saw. Then I started talking with Execute and Algared, and it just really seems to make a lot of sense to look at this game and see what Star Citizen can learn from Cyberpunk.
Or what Cyberpunk should have learned from Star Citizen.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. You're giving the plot away, Algared. Stop. But that's fine. Or the tagline away. Anyway, the point I kind of want to get at too is with the differences between the two is not just what CIG can learn from Cyberpunk or what CG Project Red did, is what we can also learn. So there is two sides to this coin. First thing we've got here in our notes is drawing parallels between the two. So I think I'll let Algared kick this list off. And you want to give us the first one, Algared, and then we'll go through them.
The first one on the list is the development time, which goes without saying. Both games have had a really long development time. And so one of the things that we see with Cyberpunk is most of that development time was hidden. You saw the first comment, hey, this game's coming, years ago, and then you didn't hear anything for 6 or so years, and then you got the, hey, it's coming out this year. With Star Citizen, we've had the long delay time, but we've actually been watching that progress over that period. And so it feels significantly longer than, say, Cyberpunk, because the ad for that really only came out, and the big push for it really only came out last year.
Let's have a quick look at that then, as in the pros and cons, just very quickly between live development and like a hidden development. There's obviously pros and cons to both. For me, I think the longer Star Citizen's gone on, the more negative it looks because it looks so glacial. I think we can all relate to that, but I think most people at this point would realize that the PU or Star Citizen at the moment, in the state that it sits, is purely just to give us something to look at, or a glorified tech demo, so to speak. Or I've heard people say moving concept art. I've heard that as well.
And QA testing to some degree.
Yeah, so they can actually work on Squadron 42. And I do think a lot of what Star Citizen is at the moment is for PR, and it is to kind of drum up support for more funding. Obviously, the other side of that coin is where they released Cyberpunk, and it clearly was not ready.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, I remember No Man's Sky.
Right.
Now, No Man's Sky, they were coming out and saying, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. But you couldn't actually play the game until it really went live.
Yeah, and so
And
it's actually
you couldn't even play aspects of it. And so Star Citizen, in a sense, is doing the same thing that No Man's Sky was doing. They're saying this is what we're doing. The difference is we can actually get in and play the different patches in the PU and actually see, okay, this is where we're heading. It's still buggy, it's still annoying, it's still frustrating, but we can see those tests and we can actually then give the feedback, do the feedback loop, which helps again in development. Probably adds more time to development.
So in short, Algared, No Man's Sky is kind of like in the middle of the two, where
I think so.
And that's kind of what Cyberpunk has said they want to try to emulate and have that kind of success story where they turn it around. But you were saying before the show that they just had a patch for No Man's Sky that's kind of delivered all those promises. But we also looked at the date that the game was released. It's actually taken them over 3.5 years to bring that game back to be fixed. And one of the things we talked about was how much quicker that would have been if they'd just done that internally. So that's also an interesting thing regards to Star Citizen and Cyberpunk is if this wasn't live, would we have got, and we'll never know, right? So this is just speculation. Would we have got Star Citizen so much earlier, like a year or two earlier, if it was not publicly pushed out every 3 months? And that's something that I'll just put out there as a question. I don't need an answer because you can't answer it, but it's just a what if.
And the other question with that is how much does the being put out there and having the feedback from the community influence and improve the content?
I would say quite a bit, and I'm just going to say this from the standpoint of not only do they get more funding, the more people play it and want to do things, but you also find people that break the game. I mean, I hate to say, you need people to break a game because your small QA group, no matter how good they are, someone out there is going to find something that will break the game.
It's a classic thing with games, isn't it? Like you go into a game and you find that one bug or that one exploit that you can do, and it does break the game. And yet, when you've got the live PU, one of the things you commonly hear that the CIG devs say, "Oh, let's see you break the game," and people go and break the game, and they go, "Oh, okay, yep." And then few iterations down the track, you find that that's been fixed. The classic one at the moment is Yidris.
I'm going to move you back on the topic, Aldrich, because you're drifting. All right, so I'm going to I'm moving you back. I'm sorry, but getting back to the similarities between Cyberpunk and Star Citizen, I think we could say that Star Citizen itself would not be in the place it is without the open. Well, it's not open-ended development anymore, but like the PU, the live development, I guess is what I'd call it. The live development of the PU, it would not be the same. And I don't know if that would work for Cyberpunk or No Man's Sky. But they've obviously done what they thought was best for them in that case. So we'll leave that topic there now. And I'd like to move on to the next one, which was where you were talking about the large scope Dasein. So I'll let you kick that one off.
Cyberpunk is a game that was pitched with massive scope, with everything from branching choices to not only the tailored missions, but it's just a pure living, breathing world. You walk in there and you kind of get that idea at times, but the more you play it, you start realizing they didn't quite live up to that ambition. But like the first time you walk out onto the one plaza is probably one of the best examples. I was actually watching Execute play. He walks out and the people were milling about and moving in such a way that it was just like, wow, like this is kind of what I expect Star Citizen to be. Somewhat.
But I'll let Algared finish this part.
When we were when I was watching Execute play and we were talking about the things we liked and disliked as we were playing, and then you were looking at your inventory at one point in the plaza, and then when you stopped and you looked up and the plaza was empty, it was like, where'd everyone go?
Yeah.
And if you wait there long enough, you see the people just disappear, and then it's just like a normal MMO, couple of NPCs walking around, and that kind of takes away from that immersion living city, doesn't it?
I think look, and I'll land somewhere in the middle between you two of what you've both just said. The potential is there, and it's the same thing we see in the PU. If you look at the PU, I showed some in the game just the other day. A guy by the name of Isaac. And I met him playing Eco, and we started talking about Star Citizen, and I was showing him game. And the thing I was trying to show to Isaac was the potential of Star Citizen, and he got that in spades. And he's going to back the game and just buy a starter pack and blah blah blah. So I digress on that subject. But the point I'm trying to get at is it's the same thing with Cyberpunk. I think they have a great framework, but I think we'll all agree that it was released. I don't know how early, but too early. I was going to say slightly, but it's more than slightly.
Features. Like they got like mantis blades walking across the walls, jacking into people's heads. I remember seeing those on their was it game E3 or one of the big conventions they showed that off on. And they aren't there. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and Execute, you were even pointing out how there's spots in the inventory that were completely and totally missing. And that's something that you can see with it, that what was rushed, what was cut, and you have to sit there with Star Citizen to think, what are they going to do to get the game to release?
Well, one of the things with the NPCs, I'll say this before I forget, is with Star Citizen NPCs, they're trying to get them on that 24-hour cycle, so the characters will, they'll get up at a certain time, they'll do their jobs, they'll go walking around, do whatever they do, then they'll disappear and go to bed, and then they'll respawn and in their closet and come out and do the same things. That's one thing that Cyberpunk clearly didn't have with those cutscenes of the milling characters running around the town. They're there and then they disappear after a time frame. So if you use that type of character, I suppose, programming where the characters go X, Y, bang, 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 go to bed, come back at this time, then you actually start to get that living and breathing world. And I think it goes back to that discussion we had with Morphologists when we were looking at AI.
I'll link that up in the corner. It was a good episode, that one. I'll put that up in the card if people haven't seen it before.
So that I think is something that would be really good to see in any MMO, especially any single player MMO.
Yeah, I think look, as I said last time, I'll kind of leave it with the like, to me the potential is insane, and I think all of us would agree that as a city, it is probably still one of the best examples I've ever seen of a city. It still has some flaws, like you can't walk into every single building, you can't go everywhere, but if Star Citizen, I would like to see Star Citizen get to at least the same level as this, at least. And I'm hoping with at the moment, let's just take one city like Hurston or Microtech or whatever. They are not at the same level. This is not by a bloody long shot. But if they could get, we've heard them talking about where they want you to be able to race around the streets on bikes and stuff. So if they end up doing that on somewhere like Terra or something like that, or the planets do eventually get to this point, no other game. Like, you taking the scale that you've got in Star Citizen and you can do this, like that's a different level.
Yeah.
So if they ever do get it to even just to this level, even if it's not as good as we want it to be, that and the fact you can fly over and all that's just going to blow every other game out of the water. But that's just me. You were going to say, Algared?
Yep. I was just going to say, I do have to make the comment that yes, I do understand that I did say a single player MMO, which is kind of contradictory, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah, you mean a single player game. That's fine.
Yeah. But I did have to say that because I know that someone in the comments is going to say.
It's all good. So I think going over the things like the AI, we went over that. We went over the handcrafted missions. We know that the Star Citizens has already got tools planned for that and stuff like that. So you mentioned a world that feels alive. You kind of went through like 4 points at once, Dasein, but I'll throw you under the bus for skipping ahead, but that's totally fine. So the last one we've got there is overhyped. And I think without a shadow of a doubt, Cyberpunk was definitely overhyped. And without cutting to the end of this program, I think we will all kind of agree that we probably were a little bit more reserved than most. But it could never stand up to what people had made it out to be.
It is certainly the problem with every game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you look at No Man's Sky, you look at Red, you look at, you name a game, and they get hyped.
Yeah, and they never quite hit that. Everyone wants their game to be hyped because it'll sell well, but also at the end of the day, it tends to end up having this backlash. And I think if you're hearing, like, we know how much this game was delayed, right? If you were hearing about the pre-orders at the start of, at the end of 2019, and as a developer, you were like, you'd almost panic a bit, wouldn't you? Like, this game isn't ready. It's not going to be ready. Can we get it ready in that time? And so you got to imagine the pressure.
The publishing house on the other side is going, awesome!
And they're also pushing you to work harder as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hype's a double-edged sword, and it's honestly something we as a society currently do too much with games or movies or whatever, because we go in there with expectations that are way bigger than can actually be fulfilled.
Hype is probably one of the best advertising methods, though, because it's word of mouth, and word of mouth is the best advertising, and that's probably why they try to get stuff hyped as much as they can. But I will be like you two, and I guess I'm giving the game away a little bit here, but look, I'm not going to say anything. I'll leave it at the end of the show because I want to leave that part for the end. So let's as
you said to me, you're giving away the key line.
Yeah. So we'll move on to learning from Cyberpunk's mistake. So the first one I've kind of got, I listed in here, is that it released too early, and I think for Star Citizen that's really obvious. And even Chris Roberts in his letter from the chairman that he did in, I think it was early January, like 8th of January or something like that, he said, and he kind of didn't say Cyberpunk, but he was clearly aiming at Cyberpunk. I am more adamant than ever that I do not want to release this early, and I think we here would agree, but I also think the audience out there would agree. We don't want that to happen for Star Citizen because go ahead.
And even with that letter, Chris even said, look, because we don't want to go too early and we do want to build on that hype and use that as we're going forward, we're going to actually hold off on the Squadron 42 briefing report. And so we're not going to bring that out as often until we're at that cycle, so that we're actually gaining, using that with us. And I do think part of that delay is COVID related. But,
I was going to say, it sounds more, I will let everything slide probably except that, because to me that sounded like a bit of an excuse just to go, hey, we'll use this as an excuse. But COVID's made that a lot harder for them to get together. But by the same token, they could just do it over Skype. So, but they have a real thing with quality and how things appear, and I think they need to kind of let that go a bit. Let's just give an example, like how many people are doing stuff from home now. So, trying to pick something relevant to this audience, say you're watching a trailer on IGN or something like that, or whatever, some kind of game trailer, and the guy doing the representation is literally sitting in his home office. I've seen things like a friend of mine was watching a Vogue video, and the person that works for Vogue was in a home office, and stuff like that. So everyone's working from home at the moment. So I think they just need to kind of embrace that. It's actually an excuse to lower their quality standards, quite honestly. And I think they need to take that chance.
A lot of things are being excuses.
And speaking of quality,
I think it's not necessarily an excuse to lower standards, but certainly an excuse to give yourself a bit more time.
But I actually think that leads to another thing. It's not a quality of their content, as in doing it through Skype. They just don't have stuff they want to share. I think that when you work it all through, it just makes it a lot more obvious that they don't have it. Like, they only want to share stuff from Star Citizen. They don't want to share it from Squadron 42, and because of that, we're seeing this huge lack of content, especially as they move up towards what is traditionally known as crunch time for Squadron 42. They've got more and more people working on it. But they've got less and less people working on Star Citizen, so they've got less and less stuff to share. I think it's also evident why we didn't see CitizenCon last year. They can say it's COVID to the cows come home, but it just made it easier. That could have all been online. We've talked about this before, right?
They could have all been online.
Yeah, and that's basically the problem. Like, they're using certain things to their advantage as excuses, but those of us that's been on the project for long enough can start to see through. Like, we've been here long enough to see what they are. So,
in terms of Star Citizen, of CitizenCon, like you and I have discussed in the past, how we think that CitizenCon is really the hype up, the encouragement for the developers more than it is for the crew. And so having that physical event where all the developers are getting together is actually an advantage for any company to be able to do that. And I do know though that
we're going down a rabbit hole here.
In CitizenCon, they I'll leave it there.
Yeah. I think one thing that's probably not exactly relevant to Star Citizen though, but was for me as someone looking at Cyberpunk, was the multiple release versions. Like they were trying to do too many things at once, and you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but most of the complaints came from the lower quality consoles, and what I mean by that is the previous generation of the PS4 and Xbox, where if you go look at someone on a PS5 or the latest Xbox, they don't seem to have the same issues. And I think that, I don't know if they were intending them to be tailored to those consoles, but I think that is what has led to it. And a lot of I watched a video by Digital Foundry recently where they were talking about the latest patch, and it still didn't make much difference on the older consoles. So they actually think that they may not be able to fix it because it's going to take them years and years and years, and they're going to have to manually downgrade everything to the point that it's literally like a whole different game. And again, if you've got all those different versions as they branch out, it takes longer and it's more complicated. Obviously, bringing this back to Star Citizen, the advantage there is we've got PC and that's it. So it probably frees it up. Dasein, you want to say?
Well, I was also going to say the other parallel is the dangers of your marketing team getting a little bit too, I don't know, too excited for expanding your opportunities instead of trying to tone down certain expectations for like the new consoles. They hype that up too much, and that's again, it's a lesson for Star Citizen to learn is you need to keep your marketing team somewhat in check too.
Well, also looking at the marketing stuff, people like Nvidia jumped on the bandwagon and tried to make it's an Nvidia game. Like they were using it to hype up RTX and stuff like that. So it goes both ways, a positive and a negative. So yeah. Going kind of slightly back to what I was saying about the different versions is also they cut a shit, and you brought this up before, a crap load of content to get that game out. Things like you were talking about, the mantis blades, different weapons. The crafting system in that game is an utter joke. You might want to create 50 of an item and you've got to sit there and do it manually all by hand. But again, great potential. You can sit there and you can see what they were going to do, but they just didn't have time to implement it. So again, in a couple of years' time, when we come back to look at Cyberpunk, it'll be great, but it'll never have been the game it could be. Once you have that grey cloud above you, you're never going to go back to that former glory. And I think as people that have been following Star Citizen, and I don't talking about just me, you and Algared, Dasein, I'm talking about all this community. I don't think anyone in Star Citizen wants to see have a cloud over Star Citizen, or we want this game to shine. And I think we all want it to take the time it needs to get it out.
Star Citizen is different. Like it doesn't have the goodwill. CD Projekt Red has the good enough of the goodwill built up from The Witcher 3 and some of their other projects to be able to be like, yeah, this is bad. What they did was, and there's some things that they did were just outright dishonest. But when you look at the big picture, they have time to mend and fix that. If Star Citizen comes out, Squadron 42 is a flop, Star Citizen is just dead. They're not going to necessarily get that chance to keep going.
Great segue. I've got a great segue because go ahead, Algared, go ahead.
I was going to say I'd temper that with Hello Games and No Man's Sky, because they did have that big, massive cloud, and people were saying there's no way they'll recover from this, and they just basically just got on and kept going and kept improving. And they have got to the point where people are saying,
but unlike CIG, they were backed by Sony. Right, so that moves us on to the next point, which is actually filled in my segue nicely again, is the financial fallout. So we saw the stock for CD Projekt Red plummet like crazy. We saw pre-order returns of No Man's Sky and stuff like that. Taking that to CIG, I don't think CIG could survive that because they've been running on our funding for years. Can they be financially attainable if we all just close our wallets? No, I don't think we can. I don't think they can. So they can't have this not a success. So in a way, it's forcing them to make the game amazing. And I kind of love that in a way, because I know I'm not going to get a shit game, because if it's shit, they're dead in the water.
Well,
the downside is that it's going to take time.
Yeah. But I, as a former developer, right, and I can't comment for you two, I know the longer a game is in development, the better it is. And I even say to you, Algared, like, oh, the Bounty Merchant one's going to take 9 years to come out or whatever by the time it releases, but I know it's going to be a bloody amazing ship because it's one of the last ones. It's at the end of the pipeline when they've got all refined, and you guys have all seen, you look at something like the Starfarer or the Retaliator, but then you look at stuff way further down the line that just comes out, so that the MSR, even it has flaws, right? But the further down the line they go, the better and better they get. Yeah, and for me, when something's delayed, it's a good thing in development, not a bad thing, because it means they give a shit. CD Projekt Red, other side of the coin, push it out early, you get a pile of shit like, well, to some people, a pile of shit like Cyberpunk.
It's like in Star Citizen, comparing the Constellation, which has had numerous reworks and is still an absolute dog's breakfast, to the Carrack.
Polished turd.
And
all right, Dasein, you want to say?
The issue is time is not in Chris Roberts' favor, and I'm going to say that not just from money coming in, but honestly, he's getting old. It's terrible for us to sit there and think about that, some of the games that we grew up with. But the guy who made them is getting old, and
I take offense with that.
That's right, Algared. When you pass, we're gonna do a will after the show. You can leave all your ships to me. It'll be fine. Right.
I say that because Chris Roberts is my age. So
well, before we get into the Chris Roberts stuff, I do want to go back because we've got one point there that's probably more close to the previous one, which is the publisher versus the independent stuff. So we'll come back to the Chris Roberts stuff after this. But so there's obviously, again, looking at No Man's Sky, looking at Cyber. This has now becomes No Man's Sky as well, I guess. But No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, and Star Citizen, we can clearly see there are positives and negatives everywhere you go. But obviously, a great positive having a publisher behind you is you've got financial security, and I think we'd all agree. That is probably the big weak point of this project on Star Citizen, because it also does put a lot of onus on us. We feel pressured. We feel like, obviously, when they do the marketing, they try. Perseus last year, we look at the ship and go, well, that seems to be twice the price of what it's worth and stuff like that. And you get channels like ours that are like, don't buy these ships because they're overpriced, but buy these ones because they're better, and quite frankly, our channel wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this game. But the other part of it is the independence of Star Citizen. What do you guys think about that?
Their independence, because they keep opening up to investors and stuff.
Sorry, what was that, Dasein?
Oh. I guess Execute stepping away. So basically, the thing is, they keep opening up to investors and everything. They're eventually going to be pressured by those investors, especially any investors that get enough clout to get on the board, to release, so they can at least recoup some of the money that they've put in.
Can you just tell us the first part of that again? Because I kicked out my sound. Sorry. Go again. So no one would have heard what you said. Sorry.
Basically, what I was saying is the issue is investors, because while he's been selective, eventually his investors are going to want to get some sort of return on what they've put in. And that's going to create a time clock, which at some point they're going to say, we need our return now. And they're going to release the game to at least try to recoup something of what they've gotten.
Yeah.
But one thing that also went with the funding is we did see last year the largest income that Star Citizen has ever had. Now, that may have been COVID related, but certainly one of the things that CIG have found is they've got a lot more new players coming on board and buying the starter packs and going on. And I know from our own Fix My Fleet channel, we get new players who say, hey, I've got these ships, what can I do?
I don't think it was just COVID, Algared, because also they did have record funding in both January and February before COVID really hit. I do also think Invictus helped as I think it was multiple things. I don't think you can just put that down to one or two things.
No, I think you're right. I think we saw the massive sales in January, February before we hit COVID. I think Invictus really did set the scene for them to say, hey, rather than just having one big sale a year, we'll do two. So it changed. I think it changed the way we'll see CIG doing things going forward. And those free fly weeks do seem that when they do those events and have those free fly weeks, as much as they are frustratingly and cause so much lag and everything else and have many issues initially, they certainly do bring in a lot of new backers. And so I think we saw that impact as well. But that's something you don't see in the development of, say, No Man's Sky, or you
Yeah.
didn't, or Cyberpunk.
So like we've kind of been saying all the way along, there are pros and cons to each one of the ways these guys have done. And I do find that it's kind of interesting how No Man's Sky's kind of creeped its way into this conversation. But it is relevant because it is a really interesting case because it's between the two. And it's also what Cyberpunk is trying to emulate. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, it's kind of a success story. While it was overhyped, they promised things that they knew they couldn't deliver. They eventually did deliver it, and that is definitely a labor of love, which is important to pay attention to, especially when looking at games like Cyberpunk, or even if Star Citizen, let's say, comes out and with all the hype and everything, it's a good game, but it's not what everyone expected. Keep in mind that this could easily still be a labor of love that will eventually get to where it's supposed to be.
A lot of the hate for No Man's Sky was because they'd seen that type of stuff ups before. But how often do you see a turnaround like No Man's Sky? It's pretty rare. And I will give CG Projekt benefit of the doubt in saying that I think if any other company that could be like No Man's Sky, it would be CD Projekt Red, because they were so loved beforehand. If it was someone like EA, and let's look at Anthem, I wouldn't. No, not a chance in hell. And Anthem, they've been trying to saying they're working on Anthem left, right, and center, but like we haven't seen anything in over a year, or very little. I just I don't believe it. CG Projekt Red. Would you guys agree that you would give them the benefit of the doubt, knowing their previous history? Like, if anyone can pull off a No Man's Sky, would it be CG Projekt Red?
If they put the development time into it, yeah. Because I've liked the previous games. I've liked Red and the other one.
You're thinking of
and Witcher.
Witcher, yeah. What about you, Dyson? You yes or no?
I think there's the will to do it. We'll just have to see. I'm not going to necessarily give them the benefit of doubt with some of the outright lies that they did, because they obviously, seriously, they had to actually know that things weren't going to work on those consoles.
It's leading to our last point of this entire show. So the last one we've got here is, did Star Citizen help Cyberpunk at all? And we've only got one thing there, and it's Star Citizen has made us more pessimistic, as you just saw from Tyson there. Right. And it really has. Like, I myself, like, I'll talk about my experience. I did not overhype myself. I tried to make realistic expectations, and I always try to now when I go, and I was talking to the show before these two guys, like, Algared come up with this point, and I had to explain it to Dyson because he didn't quite get it, but I literally said, make it about yourself. And it becomes very clear. Like, I am a way more pessimistic person because of Star Citizen. Like, I look at everything with a grain of salt now, whether it's a product I see on TV, a movie commercial, a TV, episode, or this is like when they say this is the best episode ever, I always now I try to lower the bar as low as I can so I'm not disappointed. I was saying to the guys before the show, I used to overhelp myself like crazy when I was a kid. Like, like, this is going to be amazing. And you'll be honest, how often when you overhype yourself, does it actually beat your expectations? It doesn't. But it's really great when you lower it so low that quite often they beat them, And I actually prefer that now. But I know that sounds kind of negative to say it that way, but that's how I prefer it. Algared.
And for me, what I found was that while I'd been in, alpha testing and beta testing for video games in the past, joining Star Citizen fairly early and watching the development process gave a better understanding of what it was to be a developer.
Yeah.
And so when things don't go right, I go, oh yeah, I'm used to, I've been in Star Citizen. I know the pitfalls I have. I'm used to this. And that has helped in numerous other games I go and play. And I now look at the other games and I go, oh, they really shouldn't have pulled it out yet. They really needed another development cycle to really get it to where it wanted to be. And that goes with what you were saying earlier about Cyberpunk and the potential that it had. And you just say, oh, they really wanted to just do that extra development. And so it's kind of tempered that negativity that I would have towards those games and saying, oh, it's a broken, buggy mess, and it's just, so it's helped.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying when I was showing Isaac the game the other day. Like, he was telling me all this negative stuff he'd heard about Star Citizen, and when I was showing him, he's just like, "This is nothing like what I'd heard," And Star Citizen's a hard game to show people for them to get, and when I show people now, I try to just focus on the scale, because if people can see the scale and the potential, they kind of go, right, I can see where they're going now, right?
Yeah.
And he was really impressed just with Herson, and I showed him the reclaimer. He got really excited about that, but it wasn't until I really left the city he was like, holy crap! And I'm just flying off up into space, and then he saw the whole planet, and I warped off to Magda and landed on and I just landed anywhere, and he was like, what the, like, and then I took off, and then
Yeah.
I flew to one of the little, like, just in the middle of nowhere, because the scale, like, he'd seen the whole planet, and he'd seen me fly into the moon, into Magda, and just land at this little outpost in the middle of nowhere. He's like, this is just huge. And I said, and I go, yeah, but at the moment it is kind of fairly empty, but they're eventually wanting to have like mining nodes and different nodes out there. So you won't just be going between these special points, you'll be going to and searching places. And he's like, oh my God. And I showed him, I wanted to show him some mining, and we're going to do that in a couple of days. But like, once he sees the mining, I think he'll kind of get that.
It's like,
But
oh look,
it's not a game that took us 2.5 hours. I can't sit down and show people this game. Like, you know, you open Counter-Strike as an example. You can show Counter-Strike in 15 minutes. You can't do that with Star Citizen. It's just too big.
Yeah.
And
I had my nephew join me in the IAA. You know, we're going through the displays, and I'd bought him the Nomad, and he looked at the Nomad, and he was, wow, this is huge. And we went to the IAA. He saw the Reclaimer, and he was like, you know, jaw drop, absolute blown away. And then it's like, and we can fly that.
Well, it was the same thing with Isaac, because he just thought it was like a ship like other games. And then when I took him inside, he was like, what the, you know, like he didn't realize there was a full interior or anything like that, because he hadn't seen that in other games before.
And then I took my nephew mining in the mall, and it was again the same. Wow, we're flying, and I can walk around the ship, and it just blew his mind. Sorry.
This action is, I'm bringing it back around to Cyberpunk and Star Citizen. Is that level of detail is still kind of missing from Cyberpunk. They've got some of the characters down, but the normal AI is just not there. The world is kind of cool. It's the best city we've ever seen so far, but it's not like you can go into any building you want. And I still found it very obviously gamey. Like, I just can't go to the 55th floor on this building. And there were cool reasons for that, though, like how they had to scan you on the elevators before you could, you know, every time you went to use an elevator, it would do like a scan thing before you could actually go to that floor, and you were only authorized to go to certain floors. So lore-wise, it worked really well. But to me, as a former developer, I'm sitting there going, this is a little dodgy. But
how did sense of the game with hacking? You know, you'd think you could hack your way in, wouldn't you?
How did that work for you, Dasein, the lore reasons in Cyberpunk, real quick?
I didn't mind the lore reasons because it made sense in world, but also they gave me usually so many ways to approach a mission. If you had the extra legs, you could jump up here. In one case, I found boxes and I climbed it before I had the double jump legs. I climbed my way to a mission where I pulled out a sniper rifle, got my target, and left. You're supposed to go through the entire club to go there, but once you realize, well, there's some boxes over here, why don't I try climbing up here? There's so many things like that aren't said, and many ways to just approach the mission. That's something that they did right, and that's something that actually made me go, if Star Citizen can pull that off with their cities and their missions, then it's going to be one of the best games ever.
And they've stated that before. They want you to be able to do things your own way. But yeah, I do agree. Cyberpunk, there was always multiple ways you could do things with stealth or hacking, or you could go in with brute force. And I will admit that is a really cool thing about that game. You can play it your way, and you know, it's really good. I think the only downside of that is obviously once you've picked perks in one area, it's hard to swap to another. But yeah, you can pay to get it swapped, I guess. Going back to our we've kind of really gone off topic here, but anyway, I just want to ask you guys the question: has SC made you more pessimistic? So Algared, has it actually hardened you somewhat to?
I don't think it's hardened me. I think it's opened my eyes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's opened my eyes to the nature of development and the idea that development takes time, and it's probably hardened me to the impact of a publisher pushing a game out because of.
So what happened there? That was a publisher?
That's right. No, that would be the Punisher. That would be the Punisher.
All right. And oh, you finished? Or
Yeah. I think I'll stop there.
What about you, Dyson? Has it made you more pessimistic?
Yes, hands down. It's a game that definitely was one of the things that, in recent time that has shown me hype is really a bad thing. I mean, it's like it's good to be excited about something, but you should not let your expectations get so big that there's no way a game can meet it.
Yeah.
And that goes not just for games, but for movies. And Star Citizen, again, it has the potential. You can see the potential, but you have to put the realist glasses on and say, but, and that's really where things go.
All right. Well,
sorry, I was just going to say, I think one of the negatives we do have with Star Citizen going back and recycling back is the fact that the player hype. I think we add a lot more to the expectation than CIG sometimes say. I know that the game, there's so much potential in the game and so much that it can offer, and I know that the things I want, everything that I want, isn't going to be in the game. I hope that it's at least going to have everything that Chris wants in the game. But I have a feeling that even the things he initially wanted are going to be tempered somewhat by what we want, and it'll be that kind of balance in between.
Yes,
slightly off
in the marketing team.
Slightly off topic, but going way back to what happened when I joined the chat today. What you guys are talking about is this game will never be finished, and hopefully they'll add all those things that we want down the line. So I'll leave it there.
Yep.
In the comments, guys, I'd like to see, do you think there has been some things that have been learned from Cyberpunk? Has Star Citizen made you more of a pessimist like it has us? I'm assuming it has. I'm hoping it has. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because I do love optimism, but I think it's kind of cool to be a realist at the same time, somewhere in the middle. And I think I find myself somewhere in the middle. So I'd like to know that from you guys as well. Maybe just a little bit of what Star Citizen's taught you. He's been Algared, he's been Dasein, I've been Execute. Like, subscribe, follow us on Patreon, all that type of stuff. I'm wrapping this up. It's been 42 minutes long. Went way too long. We waffled. This has been a waffle rant, but it's fine. Apologies for the sound because I kicked it out my big fat foot. But I'm sure you guys will find that interesting. We'll catch you guys in the next one.
Take care.